Hello and welcome back to 209 Prep Sports. Back in the studio, we have Scott out on location again. Where are you at this time, Scott?
I'm up in Washington, checking out the local football scene.
There you go. So as we're winding down, we got 2 weeks left in the season. The playoff picture starts to clear a little bit. There's a lot of teams kind of on the struggle bus at the end of the season, trying to make sure they can field the team. So some of the teams are collapsing at the end of the year. So you're going to start seeing probably a few more forfeits. Fortunately, we've kind of avoided, too much of the COVID, kind of just displacing games and things like that. So that hasn't seemed to be as much of a factor the last few weeks, which is good. So hopefully we can get through the playoffs, in the clear and not have too many interruptions or at least cancellations due to something like that. So it's an exciting time. Good week for a lot of teams. Kind of some surprises last week, as well as I think there were some games that obviously were not a surprise. So what did you want to lead off with today, Scott?
Well, the first one I was looking at was the Chavez McNair score. Chavez ends up winning 41-34. That turned out to be a pretty good game. A much better matchup than what I was anticipating. But it looks like we got stats from Chavez, and Dion Mayo, sophomore quarterback, was 6 for 11, 68 yards, threw for 2 touchdowns. Rushing wise, they had Reuben Hooks leading the way. He had a great night, 29 carries for 216 yards, long run of 52. And we've come to kind of expect that from him. He's been kind of a premier back in the area. And then also senior Daniel Herrera carried the ball 14 times for 68 yards. He was able to punch it in for 2 scores. And then Dion Mayo, the quarterback, also had a rushing touchdown. So pretty good night for Chavez. That puts him in good position as they head through the rest of the season.
Yeah, moving right along, we had Escalon travel to Riverbank. This is, quite expected. Escalon wins this game 51-0. Escalon, statistically, Rosevink was 5 for 10 for 115, 2 touchdowns and a pick. The leading rusher for Escalon, and they kind of got it done across the board. I mean, I think it was seen, probably getting everybody the ball just a little bit. So Batista had 3 carries for 28 yards and 2 touchdowns. Colton Page added 2 for 7 and a touchdown. JP Lyle had 5 for 37 and a touchdown, and Jameen Miller had 2 for 56 and a touchdown. On the receiving side, the leading receiver was EJ Lewis. He had 2 touchdowns for 2 catches for 67 yards and a touchdown. And Owen Nash added 1 for 25 and a touchdown. Here's the one thing that it kind of makes me, happy a little bit. We bitched about it a little bit last week, is just people not putting in stats. And for anybody, if anybody had a reason not to put stats in this week's, it was most likely Riverbank, but they went ahead and put them in. That's kudos to you guys, and kudos to your staff and your players for wanting them in. Armando Guzman, was 3 for 6 for 19. The leading, they had a negative 47 yards rushing, so it becomes, somewhat difficult. On the receiving side, Justin Miranda had 14 yards on 1 catch. So, a tough game for Riverbank. Again, they're in the rebuild process, so hopefully there are better days ahead. But again, kudos to you guys for going ahead and getting those stats in and giving those kids credit where credit's due.
Yeah, absolutely. Riverbank, that's just a sign of the character of the staff at Riverbank. And while they're struggling right now, I think we can all safely say and even the teams in the TBL, they want a better Riverbank team. And hopefully with the staff that they have there now, that's going to happen.
Yes, sir.
So moving right along, we're going to take a trip back into the Motherlode League. We had the Argonaut Mustangs taking on the Somerville Bears in a key league matchup. It was all Argonaut last Friday night. Ended up winning 42-7. We didn't get any stats from Somerville, but Argonaut, just kind of give a quick rundown. Bo Davis was 3 for 4, 51 yards and a touchdown. But the story for Argonaut was on the ground, as it usually is with that offense. You had let's see here, Colby Eckhart, senior, he was 8 carries for 233 yards and 3 scores. He really got it done. He led the way for him. You had Caleb McElfish. He was 8 carries for 62 yards and a score, and followed up by Mateo Flores, 8 carries for 71 yards and a score. So they collectively as a team, they had 34 carries, 454 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So if you've got Argonaut left on your schedule, you might want to start tuning up your run defense because they're going to be coming at you.
Yeah, a couple of scores we'll just mention just because it'll probably help with the playoff picture. Los Banos beat Sirius 55-42. Bayer gets beat by Davis 49-0, and Buick Colony gets beat by Merced 44-0. The next score we'll cover is the Manteca Central Catholic game. Both teams putting in stats. This is a game that, we knew it was going to be a tough, hard fought game. Central Catholic's just a little bit different. They're big, strong, physical, so they get after you in a bunch of different ways. So Central Catholic ends up winning this game 56-33. I don't think anybody's particularly surprised by the score, but at the end of the day, it's a convincing win for Central Catholic, and it's a tough battle for Manteca. For Manteca, Hudson Wyatt was 5 for 11 for 85 yards, 2 picks. The leading rusher for Manteca, no surprise to anybody, was Lyon Cologne, had 12 carries for 202 yards and a touchdown. Blake Nicholson added 11 carries for 138 yards and 3 touchdowns. And on the receiving side of the ball, Blake had 4 catches for 71 yards. Nobody had any touchdowns receiving. On the offensive side of the ball for Central Catholic, Tyler Wentworth was 4 for 9 for 59 yards and a touchdown, and Julian Lopez added one attempt for 1 touchdown for 15 yards. The leading rusher, Julian Lopez, Aiden Taylor was 15 for 230 for 4 touchdowns, and Julian Lopez added 18 carries for 188 yards and 2 touchdowns. Leading receiver, Jalen Nichols was 2 for 21 with a touchdown, and Julian Lopez added 1 for 13 and a touchdown. Aiden Taylor also had 1 catch for 25 yards. So pretty impressive victory for Central Catholic. That's that VOL, tough as can be with Central Catholic to Oakdale, Kimball, Manteca. So the winner of that, will definitely be battle tested, and actually all those teams should be making the playoffs. So all 4 of them are going to see some teams that aren't as good as what they've seen in league. So good for them.
No question. I think, for Manteca, this just gets marked up as a loss on their schedule, and I think they need to look past it because they're going to be a force in the playoffs. I still peg them as being very successful, having a deep playoff run, but the Central Catholic program with Coach Canepa, they always start off the year strong, but it seems like they just get better week in and week out, and that's a testament to not only the team's work ethic, but I think the coaching staff really preaches that. So by the time they get to the playoffs, they're running on all cylinders, and it really looks like they are right now.
Yeah. So
the next one I'm gonna cover real quick, and this is a big one to us, and I'll let you fill in with any color that you have. But to me, this is a big score for me because being a Linden graduate, it is awesome to see the football program bringing home a league championship for the first time since 2004. So Linden traveled up the road to Esparto, and they ended up beating the Esparto Spartans 28-14. And I'm going to cover just the Linden stats because Esparto's kind of out of our purview, but hats off to the Esparto coaches for uploading their stats. For Linden, you had Alex Herrera at quarterback. He was 10 of 16 for 175 yards and a touchdown. On the receiving end, you had Joe Cowan had 16. I'm sorry, on the rushing end, you had Joe Cowan had 16 carries for 96 yards. Michael Cook, 2 for 33. And then Alex Herrera was able to punch it in twice on the ground as well. Heading over to the receiving side of things, you had Michael Cook was 6 catches for 118 yards, a long one of 60 yards with 1 receiving touchdown. Jordan Sherman, 3 receptions for 55 yards, a long of 35. On the defensive side of things, we had Tony Callan had 10 tackles. Wunderlich, is it Matt Wunderlich, coach?
It's Martin.
Martin Wunderlich had 12 tackles, and those 2 guys were leading the way defensively for the Lions. Again, the Linden Lions winning a league championship for the first time since 2004. So hats off to you, Coach.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, they're a tough team. They gave us all we could handle. We kind of shot ourselves in the foot like we continue to do week in and week out. So we got to learn to take care of the ball. 3-4 fumbles, something like that. No picks, but and then just some mistakes on the defensive side of the ball. We stuffing them and then kind of give up the big one. So they were tough. They gave us a really good game. It's a poke to get on a bus for over 2 hours and get up there in Sacramento traffic and all that type of stuff. Unfortunately, we lost a player for the rest of the season to a broken arm. Michael Cook had 160 yards last week and 160 something yards this week. So pretty impressive performance by Michael. And luckily he's a junior, so he gets to come back and kind of pick up where he left off. But I was proud of our guys. We battled hard, and like you said, since 2004. It's been a little bit of a weird season, but we'll take it. We earned it. We've worked our butt off, and I'm proud of our guys for it. So,
yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be fun to watch this team in the playoffs. So let's see here. Moving along. Next one we'll cover real quick. A team that we always like talking about. Hillmar played Houston. Score was a little lopsided on this one that I actually wasn't expecting, but Hillmar walks away with a 28-0 victory. That's really priming them for the playoffs. I'm sure that wasn't an easy 28 points because Houston has been putting up some good numbers themselves this year. Looks like we only have stats from Hillmar. So on the passing side, we had Jason Pimentel. He was 11-17 for 177 yards and 2 touchdowns. Receiving wise, Brock John Perry was rushing. I keep wanting to jump into receivers for some reason. Rushing, Brock John Perry had 6 carries for 69 yards and a touchdown, and Jason Pimentel had 17 carries for 104 yards and a touchdown. Receiving wise, you had Derek Taylor, who's only a junior, led the way. He had seven catches for 117 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then on the defensive side of the ball, it looks like it was defense by committee for the most part, but you had Luke Cox had 10 tackles. Brock John Perry getting it done on both sides of the ball. He had 12 tackles, and those 2 guys led the way for a very stingy Hillmar defense.
Yeah, I mean, I got to admit, I'm surprised by the score. I mean, Houston's tough. I mean, so Hillmar, and not that Hillmar's not tough. They're actually a very good football team. I kind of expected a little bit closer, but who knows? I mean, we had the same type of issues, so maybe they turned the ball over more than they expected to. Without stats, it's difficult for us to see. So moving right along in the TVL, Livingston goes to Modesto Christian. This was just a lopsided affair from the beginning. Livingston jumps out to a 35-0 lead in the first quarter, led by their senior Batista, quarterback. He was 4 for 7 for 109 and 3 touchdowns for a 141 quarterback rating. They split up the carries. They only had 14 carries, but they had 10 different guys get the ball. You had Carlos Baez with a touchdown and 62 yards. Omar Baez, 62 yards and a touchdown. Daniel Cruz, 1 carry for 30 yards and a touchdown. Ricardo Partida had 1 carry for 28 yards and a touchdown. Zach Duran had 2 carries for 50 yards and a touchdown. The leading receivers, actually 3 guys caught the ball. Jordan Alvarez had 2 catches for 31 and a touchdown. Kane Ambrose had 1 for 28 and a touchdown, and Flavio Aguilar had 1 for 50 and a touchdown on the Modesto Christian side of the ball. Again, kudos to you guys for putting the stats in. Jimenez was 5. He's only a sophomore, 5 for 13 for 21. The leading rusher was Ray Corral, 16 for 51. He's also only a junior. Jimenez returns as well. He had 6 carries. The leading receiver was Zion Jones. He had 1 catch for 10 yards. Ray Corral added 1 for 4, and Jesus Vasquez had 1 for 7. So pretty lopsided event, 55-0 Livingston over Modesto Christian.
As we move back up into the Middle League, we had another key league matchup between what I think is pretty evenly matched teams. You had Calaveras winning by a score of 34-14 over the Amador Buffaloes, which are going to be in Linden's sights here pretty soon. So that's an interesting score. Unfortunately, we don't have any breakdown of statistics there. So we're going to be hearing more from the Amador Buffaloes. Next score we want to cover, going deep dive into the Kimball Jaguars over the Sierra Timberwolves. Unfortunately, we don't have any stats from Sierra. I know it's been a difficult year for Sierra. They, that's a program that Coach Johnson has really turned around, and this year has not been kind to them. I know they've been hit pretty hard with the COVID bug, but Sierra's a program that's not going to be down for long. I expect to see them back on track by next year and doing the things that they're accustomed to doing. But take a look at Kimball. One of our favorite players that we've talked about over the season is Nick Coronado. He's got he had 10 completions on 15 attempts for 208 yards and 4 touchdowns for a quarterback rating of 149.3. When you watch this kid play, it's not easy to play quarterback in any league by any means, but he makes playing quarterback look easy. He's just a really, really fun kid to watch, and I expect to see him doing more at the next level.
Yeah, for sure.
As if he hadn't done enough, he also rushed for 3 times for 83 yards, a long 70, and put 2 more touchdowns on the board. So really, this was, and no offense to anyone, and I mean this kind of jokingly, but it was basically Coronado versus Sierra that night. He put 6 touchdowns on the board, both between his arm and his legs. On the receiving end, he had Willie Clifton had a touchdown reception of 66 yards. Mason Rivera had 4 receptions for 69 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Eric Gordon Jr. had 2 receptions for 43 yards and a touchdown. So this really was, from start to finish, was all about Kimball. And this is another team that, while they didn't attain that perfect regular season that they were looking for, look out for them in the playoffs. They're going to be a tough beat for whoever they play.
Yeah, I would agree. Moving right along, Mountain House goes to Pacheco. Mountain House ends up winning this game 33-28, so a really tight game. The score wasn't broke down, but both teams have had stats. Roy Gardner was 2 for 2 for 95. Amari Brooks was 7 for 14 for 64 and 2 touchdowns. The leading rusher was Roy Gardner. He had 15 carries for 173 yards and 2 touchdowns. And D. Francis III was 4 for 130 and a touchdown, with Roy Gardner adding 5 for 29 and a touchdown. On the Pacheco side of the ball, you had Daniel Rivas was 5 for 11 for 113, a touchdown and 2 picks. The leading rusher was Jay Delatorre. He had 25 carries for 226 yards and a touchdown. And the leading receivers were Abel Bravo with 2 catches for 53 yards and a touchdown, and Navarro added 1 catch for 15 yards and a touchdown. A couple of quick scores that we just want to add, but we won't cover because they're probably playoff bound, is Turlock beats Modesto 48-25. Lathrop gets a forfeit from Johansson, which I'm sure is either injury or COVID based. So Johansson can't field the team last Friday. Downey puts it on Enoch's 45-20, again, another playoff team. And then Grigori beat Pittman 27-21. I don't know where we're at. Oh, you want to cover the Tokay St. Mary's game?
Yeah, so I'm going to jump right in on Tokay St. Mary's, and I expected a St. Mary's victory here, but Tokay's been having a good season, but St. Mary's runs away with this after scoring 34 unanswered points in the first quarter. They end up finishing 62-3. I think this is a better Tokay team than what the score posted. St. Mary's is just rolling right now, really gearing up for the playoffs. We'll cover some of the St. Mary's stats because that's what we have. One of the top quarterbacks in the area, Cruz Ferreira, was 5 of 6 for 115 yards and a touchdown. He had a quarterback ranking, and I think this was tops in the area of 163.2. But I know that the coaching staff at St. Mary's kind of tapped the brakes on him a little bit, just because they were getting it done on the ground. Let's see here. Rushing wise, we had a bunch of ball carriers. Jaden Marshall was 1 of 48 with a touchdown. Nate Danielson was 1 of 10 with one carry for 10 yards and a touchdown. Asante Carter, the sophomore, had 7 carries for 103 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he led the way. But really, the story here was just St. Mary's. Every time they touched the ball was pretty much doing what they wanted. And I know the coaching staff at St. Mary's was trying some different things and really just trying to keep the ball on the ground so they could protect it. But St. Mary's is is rolling right now. And again, you're going to see this team do great things in the playoffs.
Yeah, agreed. Moving right along, Edison goes to Bear Creek. Oh man, I hope the CIF does something with this. Edison's just having their way in the SJ2A, and so they win this game 50-0. And these statistics are indicative of that. You had the starting quarterback was Aiden Carr. He was 3 for 3 for 140 and 2 touchdowns. Jordan Nelson, the backup, was 2 for 2 for 35 and a touchdown. The leading rusher only had 3 carries. Jaden Blackshear had 3 carries for 126 and a touchdown, and Marcus Harrison had 3 for 86 and a touchdown. Leading receiver kind of spread it out a little bit. DeJuan Short had 1 for 65 and a touchdown. Jay Sebron Jr. had 1 for 50 and a touchdown, and Tyree Owens had 2 for 28 and a touchdown. Again, this is back-to-back weeks. I believe the score last week against Stag was 70-0. This week's 50-0. So 120-0 in a league game across 2 league games is a difficult, and it's not to knock Bear Creek or anybody else. I just think that Edison has really elevated their program, and they need to be put into a program. And that can't be fun for those kids either, going out and really not your starting running back gets 3 carries. So how happy is he, when the game's all said and done? So at the end of the day, I think there should be some, hopefully, focus on making sure that we get these kids, these teams aligned with, like talent, like size, those types of things. So we'll see what happens.
It seems like within our section, we've got just everything all over the spectrum. We've got some some top tier teams, just like you said, Edison, St. Mary's, Central Catholic, Kimball, Manteca. They're all kind of the cream that's rising to the top right now. And I don't mean to leave anybody out, but then we've got, on the other end, we've got teams that are struggling to put people on the field for whatever reason, whether it's injury, whether it's COVID or whatever. But I just think that there's a resurgence in our area football wise that is a welcome sight to see. It's exciting if you're a high school football fan to know that on any given Friday night, you have your pick of great games. And so, to your point, it would be awesome if Edison was able to schedule in some maybe, non-conference games a little bit more with some top tier teams and bring them to the Stockton area. That'd be fun to watch for sure. But I don't know that that's possible.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't know what the solution is. And, you end up, what do you do really? You put St. Mary's, Edison, Lincoln, Lodi, you start putting all these teams, maybe, I don't know, what do you think about a Central Catholic? Do you do a parochial league school? I think this is where it's kind of frustrating as a coach, and then it's kind of frustrating as, hosting this podcast that, we didn't play football for well over a year, and a realignment could have easily been done. There was so much time for people to not have to be concerned with any games. There was 0 games going on for 15, 16 months. So the fact that we just kind of, the CIF our section kind of sat on their hands when a realignment could have been done is kind of sad, to be honest. And now you're seeing, and again, like you said, St. Mary, or Tokay is a perfect example of this. Tokay deserves to be, with their season, deserves to be in the playoff, picture. But are they really a D1 team? They're kind of on the resurgence. So are they more like a D2, D3 type of a team? There's the past success that kind of relegates teams like a Hillmar and I think a Sonora and a Ripon. So they're not allowed to play in their actual size of their division because of continued success, which is fine. But at the end of the day, this isn't about, it's not about, it shouldn't be about money. It should be about making things competitive and making sure that, the teams are not in their league getting, just trucked by a team like Edison, on a consistent. They have a running clock in the first quarter almost every single game in that league. It's not fun for anybody.
Yeah, and I think you've kind of touched upon a point that you and I have spoke about offline a little bit, and we kind of discussed it with, it would be interesting if Major League Baseball went to a kind of a tournament format for the playoffs. Got rid of National League, American League, and just went pure tournament format and rank the teams that way. Well, I think it's no secret that I'm not a big fan of the CIF for a number of reasons, but I think a solution and a manageable solution, and this is kind of going outside the box. But if you look at the English Premier Soccer League, for example, what they do is they've got X amount of teams that are in the top tier, and then they've got teams that are in the bottom tier. And at the end of the season, the three, I think it's the three, maybe it's two. People can correct me if I'm wrong, but let's say it's the two bottom teams get relegated to the lower level, and the two top teams from the lower level get moved up to the top level. Maybe the solution is, and this would take a pretty big effort in terms of a culture change, was to get rid of school size as your selector when it comes to putting people into divisions, and make your divisions based on success, and put teams and match them up a little bit better, because there's some small school teams out there, the Escalons, the Hilmars, that could very well compete in higher leagues, but they're, because of their school size, they're where they're at. But maybe go to a format like that, and let schools and teams figure it out themselves by the game that they play on the field.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the solution is going to be. I've thought, do you make independent, or do you allow some of these schools to become independent and find their own schedules? It's kind of like, our situation, or, even a Bret Hart, a school that, is now doesn't have a varsity football team this year, but I think that they're going to kind of get back into the varsity situation next year. But, do you make a league and just allow you to put your schedule together? Like for us, for instance, this year, we got 4 forfeits in we're going to have 10 contests. We're going to have 10 games, but they're not against our league opponents. And is how it, like AD and I've been talking, is how's that going to affect our seeding? Because those are, these teams, a lot of these teams have played since they forfeited against us. They played, not too long after. So, we likely would have won those games. Would that have given us a home game or a bye? And now we're in a situation where we have 4 losses to 4 teams that collectively have 3 losses. They're like 32-3 or something like that. And so, it ends up being situationally, you end up wondering what the best solution is. And I'm not sure that there is a perfect solution, but I don't think the way things are aligned now is the right way to do it. You have too many teams in the SJ2A just don't have a chance. You have a couple of teams in the TVL that really just don't have a chance. You have a couple of teams in the MLL that really just don't have a chance, and so I think it gets to, and even you have teams in the TCAL that just don't have a chance,
Right.
And so what's the, I don't know what the answer is, I think that there has to be something done, and I don't know if it should be tied to, maybe it's factors, maybe there's 5 factors. It's, winning record, and maybe it's your school population, and obviously it's got to be distance, because now with the price of gas approaching $4.50 or $5 a gallon or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
that's got to be taken into consideration. It's expensive to travel, and these aren't, a lot of schools are not profitable. They're not. There's not an income center for these. We're fortunate where we're at that we get a lot of fans come into games, and we got a great boosters club. You have a lot of businesses that help. You have a lot of individuals that help. So, financially, we're in a relatively decent spot, but, to start taking, 100 bus trips a year to, 80 miles plus, that's a lot of money. It ends up, and for a school to, how do you factor that in? So now you take this leap into the SJ2A where you can be relatively competitive, but even if we were to go and get second in that league, we can't drop to, I think they're D2, so the lowest we can go is D4. So now you have a population with 750 kids playing D4 schools, which is Kimball and all those guys. So, I just don't know what the proper solution is, but it's sad that the powers that be couldn't have spent enough of their free time during the lockdown to get this thing set up. You could have brainstormed. You basically had a year to brainstorm, put things together, put a league together, scrap it, put a league together, scrap it. At some point over that year period, you would think you'd come up with a solution that's a lot better than what we have now.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you hit the nail on the head. We have a governing body that really just wants to do things for the sake of doing them, because that's the way that we've always done it. And it just doesn't seem like they have the ability or the want to think outside the box, because really what they're doing is a disservice to today's student athlete. They're sitting back, they're collecting their monthly paychecks from the schools, and they're collecting their money from the gate at playoffs, and they're doing all that, and that's great. But really, what are you doing that is taking a proactive approach to make things better for our student athletes? And I'll just leave it at that. I'm just thoroughly disappointed that we don't do, and when I say we, I mean us as being part of the CIF, are not doing a fair and accurate job to make things better for our student athletes. But that's kind of where I'll leave it at this point.
For sure.
Moving back into scores, another one that I want to hit upon, and we've talked about these two schools in the past, and they're two schools that I think we both kind of, we're kind of outside fans, and that's the Stag Delta Kings and the Franklin Yellow Jackets. And Delta goes in and they kind of rebound off a tough loss. They end up beating Franklin, which is a little bit of a surprise score to me. They end up beating Franklin 41-0. We have stats from Stag, as we always do. They're really good about putting their stats, but I've been told that Franklin had a problem with their Wi-Fi, so they weren't able to get their stats uploaded. For Stag, one of our kind of favorite players in the area, Angel Gonzalez, he was 9 of 16 for 304 yards and 3 touchdowns, just getting it done again. He's put up some pretty impressive performances over the year, and Coach Nava really has done a good job of coaching this team. We had on the ground, we had Willie Turner had 11 carries for 74 yards and a touchdown. And Travion Rouser had 2 carries, 6 yards, and he punched one in as well. On the receiving side, Willie Turner also getting it done. 3 receptions for 86 yards and another touchdown. K. Thomas Gray had 3 receptions, 150 yards, long of 65 and a touchdown. And Tyreek Trahan had 2 receptions for 55 yards and a touchdown. On the defensive side of things, we had Travion getting it done on both sides of the ball, as a lot of these athletes do. He had led the team with 9 tackles, and followed up by Brennan Davis. He had 6 to accompany him. So Stag getting a key league matchup win, and I'm sure this won't be the last win that they get, or hopefully moving on. But that does put them into playoff eligibility, but we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, there's a rumor going around too that they may waive the 4-win minimum to get into playoffs, so that might open the doors for some teams as well. The one thing I wanted to say about that Franklin Stag game is that Franklin, started the season off really strong, and I don't think it's a direct reflection of them. Everybody needs to understand that they're in a really weird situation right now. So they're having their facilities rebuilt, and they're going to have probably one of maybe the nicest stadium around, because it's brand new. But they just don't have a place to practice on campus, so they're having to go, I can't remember where they said they're practicing at one of the elementary schools, but it's, to get 30, 40 kids to that, to that practice facility is not always the easiest thing to do. So they're dealing with some internal issues that have really nothing to do with football, and it's more logistical than anything. So you got to feel for Coach King. Ralph King's a good guy. I mean, a hard worker. He has that program, kind of righted the ship a little bit. But, they were dealing with some things that are just, ancillary and don't really have a whole lot to do with, X's and O's or putting up touchdowns on Friday nights. It's more the things that go on during the week. Now, everybody has things that they have to deal with, but I think that their situation's a little bit more difficult just due to, I think a couple of different factors, but, I would definitely say not being able to practice has probably put them in a little bit of a tough spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a Franklin Yellow Jackets fan, and for that coaching staff to do what they're doing this year to keep things afloat and to have the record that they have, they're definitely staff-wise one of the performances of the year, I think, and really excited to see what the next few years have in store for Franklin now that, and I agree with you, now that they're going to have maybe the nicest facility around. I mean, that's just a beautiful stadium that they've built. And, word has it that old Greg Marsh has already tabbed it as the Hive. So
moving right along, we had Tracy travel to Lodi. Really tough game. Lodi gave St. Mary's all they could handle last week, and so kind of thought this game would be a little bit different, but Tracy gives them everything, everything and then some, ends up losing this game 35-42. Lodi did not put in any stats, but Tracy's stats, Ross Escobar was 9 for 14 for 150 with 3 touchdowns and 2 picks. He also added 6 carries for 10 yards and a touchdown. Austin Hoysey was 15 for 154 and a touchdown. The leading receiver was Curtis Maynor. He had 7 catches for 126 and 2 touchdowns. And Mason Myers had 1 catch for 28 yards and a touchdown. The leading tackler is Isaac Salinas. He had 10 tackles, or 18 total tackles. 8 solos and 10 assisted tackles. So pretty good night. We had, and you can add the 1.5 tackles for loss. Khalil Walls had 10 tackles total, 4 unassisted. And then Marcellus Young had 5 solo tackles, 3 assisted tackles. So pretty good night for Tracy. They got to be pretty proud of what they're kind of turning the corner with in their program. They've kind of struggled the last couple of years. For you and I, it's always weird to have these conversations about Tracy, because Tracy was in mine and your days, Tracy was the powerhouse. They were it. I mean. And so everybody, including St. Mary's and Lincoln, struggled with Tracy. Yeah, for sure. Tracy was, they were the powerhouse for sure in the southern part of the county. And, as areas grow and there's more schools, it kind of spread the wealth out a little bit. But, Tracy Bulldogs are, they're always a team to be reckoned with for sure. As we move back to a TVL matchup, we had East Union taking on Weston Ranch, and as kind of maybe expected, East Union ends up winning this game 49-13. It really was a story of East Union all night long, and a player that we love talking about, hearing about and watching play. Luke Weaver out of East Union was 16 of 19 for 330 yards, threw for 5 touchdowns, and really had an identical quarterback ranking as Cruz Herrera at St. Mary's with 163.9. Rushing wise, Luke Weaver did have a touchdown, but he actually had, in a rare form for him, had negative rushing yards, but that was probably from scrambling. But David Flores was 2 for 40, 2 carries for 40 yards and a touchdown. On the receiving side, Dylan Lee had 6 receptions, 154 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Nicholas Luna had 1 reception, 10 yards, and a touchdown. And Jacob Tost, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, he had 4 receptions, 107 yards, and 1 touchdown. On the defensive side of things, you had, let's see here. Oh, we didn't get our defensive stats uploaded for East Union, but it really was the story of the Lancers all night long, and a program that we are excited to see making a resurgence in the area. Yeah. We'll just touch on a couple of scores since there are not a lot of statistics in. Lincoln beats West 54-6. Gustine goes to LeGrand and beats them 31-28. Oristimba goes to Waterford and loses 61-35. And the next score we'll cover, Mariposa goes to Ripon Christian. Ripon Christian wins this game 14-7, so a very tough game on both sides. Wyatt Green was 12 for 23 for 180 and a touchdown for Mariposa. The leading rusher was Aiden Lopes. He had 8 carries for 45 yards. The leading receiver was Aiden Lopes. He had 1 catch for 78 yards and a touchdown. Landon Robinson added 6 catches for 50 yards, and Andres Ibarra added 3 catches for 39 yards. For Ripon Christian, Trey Fasani was 10 for 20 for 101. He also rushed 9 times for 79 yards. Micah DeYoung was 10 for 42 with a touchdown. And Grant Sonke added 12 carries for 58 yards and a touchdown. Brady Grons also had 12 carries for 67 yards. The leading receiver was Griffin DeBro. He was 4 for 63. Ty Vanderhook was 2 for 26. So a very tough game. 14-7 is not your typical high school football game, but pretty impressive win for Ripon Christian, which should help them stay in the playoff picture.
Yeah, so as we now move into our matchups for this upcoming week, starting tomorrow night, a couple of key matchups, and I'll go over a couple of them and then have you pick up. But obviously, a big one tomorrow night. We've got Linden playing Amador. That's a big matchup. Kind of an old Motherlow League rivalry game, if you will. Davis plays Johansson, but I don't expect Davis to get a game. Johansson had to forfeit their last game. I see that as probably happening again. Mountain House takes their 3-5 record, takes on Ceres. Modesto Christian at 1-6 is going to play a very fired up Helmar team as they're really tooling themselves to get ready for the playoffs. Let's see here. Argonaut plays Sonora, which I think is probably for the Motherlow League Championship.
It is, yeah.
So that's going to be a big game for them. And then Lathrop, a team that started off with a bang and has kind of tailed off a little bit recently, is taking on Los Banos. And I'll pass it over to you. Yeah,
so we won't cover a whole lot of the games but I'll just run through the projected brackets as they stand today. I know this is kind of subjective. There's going to be, obviously, until we get to the end of week 10, there's going to be some things that are going on. But as of today in Division 1, they have Rockland being the 1 seed in Division 1, with Folsom being the 2 seed. The 3 seed would be Jesuit, and the 4 seed would be St. Mary's at this point, with Edison being the 5 seed. Oak Ridge is the 6, Del Oro is the 7, Lincoln of Stockton is the 8, Sheldon is the 9. The 10 ends up being Turlock, the 11 is Enox, the 12 is McClatchy. So that's a pretty, fierce bracket. I mean, you have Rockland has kind of just really turned they've always been really good, but not like they are this year. They beat Folsom a couple of weeks ago, even though Folsom was missing their starting quarterback. I believe Rockland's starting quarterback is also out. So there's some things that are going on. St. Mary's, will need to beat Lincoln for these rankings to hold. I would assume that if Lincoln beats them, there'd be a pretty big shift in this. Last spring, St. Mary's handled Jesuit pretty good, but Jesuit's now going to likely win the Delta League, so they're going to be pretty tough. So moving right along to the Division 2 bracket, you have Central Catholic being the 1 seed. The 2 is Granite Bay. The 3 is Antelope. The 4 is Vacaville. The 5 is Whitney. 6 is Downey. 7 is Indercombe. 8 is Elk Grove. 9 is Wood Creek. The 10 is Monterey Trail, which I think Monterey Trail has 1 or 2 wins, so there would have to be some things happen for them to get in. The 11 is Lodi, who's really turned their program around, and then Grigori rounds it out as the 12. In the Division 3 bracket, you have Manteca being the projected 1 seed. The 2 seed being Capital Christian. The 3 is Lincoln of Lincoln. The 4 would be Oakdale. The 5 would be Sakai. The 6 is Christian Brothers. The 7 Patterson. The 8 Yuba City. The 9 Rodriguez. The 10 Roseville. The 11 Grace Davis. And the 12 would be Golden Valley. Again, moving along into the 4, Kimball is projected number 1 seed. Vanden is the 2 seed. The 3 seed would be Merced. The 4 is Vista Del Lago. East Union comes in at the 5 seed. So like you said, that game's pretty important for East Union this weekend. Ponderosa being the 6. The 7 is Pioneer. The 8 is Wood. The 9 is Placer. The 10 Del Campo. The 11 is El Camino. And the 12 would be West Park. Division 5 bracket. This is where things are going to get a little bit crazy, because you have teams that if they win Division 5, they got to stay there. If they lose Division 5, they can drop down. If they have continued success, they have to stay there. So there's a lot of things going on that are going to, there's going to be some factors that are going to have to play, that are going to be in play. But as it stands now, you have Escalon being the 1 seed, Hilmar being the 2, Union Mine being the 3, Castle Robles being the 4, Sonora ends up being the 5, the 6 is Woodland, and this is with Sonora anticipating that they beat Argonaut. So if Argonaut wins, unfortunately for Argonaut, they jump to 5. Sonora may still stay in 5 or have to drop to 4. I think they have to stay in 5 for continued success. The 6 ends up being Woodland. The 7 is Ripon. The 8 is Rosemont. The 9 is Colfax. The 10 is Nevada Union. The 11 is Lathrop. And the 12 is Ceres. Division 6, the 1 is Bradshaw Christian. So Bradshaw Christian is another team. They're in a Division 4 league, I believe, or a Division 5 league. So they would actually have to play Division 5. So this may change if they end up winning league. But they're the 1. Argonaut is the projected 2. The 3 is Waterford. The 4 is Houston. The 5 is Livingston. The 6 is Liberty Ranch. The 7 is Linden. The 8 is Dixon. The 9 is El Dorado. The 10 is Somerville. The 11 is Orostemba. And the 12 is Gustine. So again, there's a lot of things that could potentially change this week, but that's as of this week, and we'll revisit it again next week. And finally, in Division 7, you had Vacaville Christian being the projected 1, Woodland Christian the 2, LeGrand the 3, Delta the 4, Esparto the 5, Mariposa the 6, and Rio Vista would be the at-large at 7, and Forest Hill comes in as the at-large at 8. So again, there's a lot of things that are going to happen this Friday and next that could, put a wrench in these things. And these are just projections, and there's a lot of mistakes that I can already see. But as they stand now, that's kind of how it looks. So this is an important week for a lot of teams, just to stay on the winning track and make sure that they don't hurt their. You only want to help your playoff seeding at this point. You don't want to position yourself in a way that you take a bad loss late and ends up putting you down in the bracket. Are you still there? So
I had my mute button on, so I didn't think. It's going to be interesting to see how some of these matchups play out. One of the things that pops out to me is if at 1 and 2, if a Kimball Vanden championship game would be, that's just one example of matchups that would be really interesting to see, because Vanden's a lot like Tracy in my mind. Vanden used to be a powerhouse, and it sounds like they're making a resurgence. But that would be an interesting matchup.
Yeah, I think all of it. I think once we get to this, past this week, the playoff picture starts to clear. Some teams are not going to be anywhere near 4 wins, so I think that there's a couple of teams that need to win out to get to the 4 wins. It'll be interesting to see who does and does not. Factor into this as far as, their win-loss, their strength of schedule. There's some teams that have beat other teams that are seated below the teams that they beat. So I think initially this is, you're putting, for all intents and purposes, you have 6 sections of 12 teams. So there's 72 teams there, and then you add the other 8. So you have 80 teams making playoffs. So I don't think it's going to be, there's not an algorithm that just puts you, makes things the easiest. CalPreps, they use the CalPreps ranking system and max prep. So I think everything's kind of factored in. You take an odd team like us or one of the MLO teams who's getting a bye every week. At least one team gets a bye because Bret Hart didn't play. How does that factor in? So there's a lot of things I think that make this a little bit more difficult than just, these teams should make it and this is how it should be. So. It's always exciting. I think it's exciting for teams like ours that, not a whole lot of playoffs appearances recent, of late. Now we're kind of turned it around most recently. So it's neat to be able to even have these conversations this late in the season for some teams. You have those other like the Lodi's of the world who've turned their program around, and now, they're going to definitively make a playoff, get a playoff spot. So it's good for, teams like Lodi. Like we mentioned in the past, hopefully, for the Franklins and the Tracys and those teams kind of turn their stuff around, and in the near future, they're back in the playoff picture. So as we wind down, you have any words of wisdom that you want to add?
Not really. I'm really excited about where we're at in terms of high school football in the San Joaquin Valley. And it's going to be a fun race here on out to see who's going to position themselves for those state bowl games. It's fun to be back here. We've been without it for a while, and high school playoff football atmosphere in the Central Valley is just fantastic.
Yeah, 100% agree. Well, travel safe. Appreciate you calling in. Thank you everybody for listening. We'll talk to you guys next week.